My father died, then someone broke into his secret mailbox. The first call to my father's phone came 23 hours after he died. I almost ignored it. His cell was lying face down on my kitchen table beside his wallet, his keys, and the sealed plastic bag the hospital had given me. I had spent the morning calling relatives, choosing a funeral home, and answering questions I wasn't ready to hear. Was there a will? Did he want to be buried or cremated? What should we put in the obituary? When the phone began vibrating against the wood, I froze. For one irrational second, I expected to see Dad's name on the screen. Instead, the caller ID said Harbor Shipping Center. I answered because I thought he might have ordered something before he died. "Hello," a woman spoke quickly. "May I speak with Mr. Grant Mercer? My father passed away yesterday." There was a pause. "I'm very sorry," she said. "My name is Nina. I manage Harbor Shipping on Waverly Avenue. Your father rented a private mailbox here." I looked toward the front window, as though someone might be standing outside listening. "My father had a mailbox?" "Yes, box 214. I'm calling because someone broke into it last night." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Was the store robbed?" "No, that's the strange part. Nothing else was touched. Whoever came in went directly to your father's box. What was taken? We don't know." Everything inside it. A cold pressure settled behind my ribs. My father owned a house. He received bank statements, utility bills, birthday cards, and junk mail at the same address where he had lived for 32 years. He had never mentioned a private mailbox. "Why are you calling his cell?" "It's the number on the account, and there's something else you should know." I waited. The person who broke in used a key to enter the lobby. Harbor Shipping kept its mailbox area open after business hours for customers. The front door required an electronic access card. "The police think it may have been another customer," Nina continued. "But whoever did it covered the camera and forced only your father's box." "When?" "Just after 11 last night. My father had been dead for less than 12 hours. I looked at the plastic hospital bag again. His keys were inside, including, I now noticed, one small brass key I did not recognize. Harbor Shipping occupied the corner unit of a faded strip mall between a laundromat and a tax office. By the time I arrived, a uniformed officer had already left, and Nina was standing behind the counter with a clipboard pressed against her chest. She was in her late 50s, with gray blonde hair pulled into a tight knot. "You must be Grant's daughter." "Claire," I said. The sympathy in her expression looked genuine. "I'm sorry we had to meet this way." She locked the front door and led me into the mailbox lobby. Rows of small metal doors covered 2 walls. Most were clean and square. Box 214 hung crookedly from its frame. The lock had been drilled out. Silver shavings still glittered on the floor beneath it. "You said they used an access card," I said. Nina nodded. "Every customer gets one. The entry system recorded a valid card at 11:07 p.m. Whose? We can't tell. The cards aren't assigned individually in the system. We buy them in batches." That seemed like an astonishing flaw, but I kept the thought to myself. "How did they cover the camera?" She pointed toward the ceiling. A square of brown paper had been taped over the lens. "They knew exactly where it was," she said. "They brought tape, a drill, and something to catch the metal shavings. There was almost no mess." "Then why are there shavings now?" The officer shook the box door to see how it had been opened. I stepped closer. The metal around the lock was scratched, but the damage was controlled. Whoever had done it had not panicked. "Did my father come here often?" "Every Thursday." That surprised me almost as much as the mailbox itself. "What time?" "Usually around 4. He'd collect his mail, buy a newspaper from the machine outside, and sit in his car for a few minutes before leaving." "Did he receive packages?" "Not often, mostly envelopes." "What kind?" "I couldn't say. Certified mail, sometimes, and express envelopes." "He signed for one last week." "From whom?" Nina hesitated. "I'm not supposed to share customer information without legal authority. My father is dead, and someone emptied his mailbox hours afterward." "I understand. Did you see the envelope?" She looked toward the counter as if considering whether the security cameras recorded sound. "It was from a law office." "Which one?" "I only remember the city. Fairmont." Fairmont was 90 miles away. My father had no lawyer there that I knew of. Did anyone ask about his box recently? Nina's face changed. Not much, just enough. Someone did. When? 3 days ago. A man came in and said he was Grant's nephew. He claimed your father had lost his mailbox key and sent him to pick up the mail. My father didn't have a nephew. I asked for identification. He said he'd left it in the car, then he walked out and never came back. What did he look like? Baseball cap, glasses, maybe 50, average height. Thin. Did the camera get him? The police have the footage. Was his face visible? Partially. Did you tell my father? I called him immediately. What did he say? Nina took a breath. He asked whether the man had opened the box, and when you said no, he sounded relieved. Did he ask what the man looked like? No, that struck me as wrong. If someone pretended to be my relative, my father would have wanted every detail. He asked only one question, Nina said. What? Whether the man had shown me a photograph. I stared at her. A photograph of what? He didn't say. On the drive to Dad's house, I replayed the call in my head, a private mailbox, a man pretending to be family, a letter from a law office in another city. A break-in less than 12 hours after Dad died, and a photograph. Dad's death had been sudden but not mysterious. At least that was what I had believed. He had collapsed in his kitchen while making coffee. His neighbor, Russell Dane, had found him after noticing the front door partly open. The emergency room doctor said it appeared to be a massive cardiac event. Dad was 64. He had high blood pressure, though he took medication and walked 2 miles every morning. The doctor had recommended an autopsy because of his age and the unexpected nature of the death. I had agreed automatically. The preliminary results would take several days. Until the phone call, I had viewed the autopsy as a formality. Dad's house stood on a quiet street lined with maple trees and identical brick ranches. I parked in the driveway and remained in the car for a moment. His newspaper was still in the flower bed. The sight of it hurt more than the hospital had. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee. The mug he had been holding when he fell was gone. Russell had cleaned up the broken ceramic before I arrived yesterday. He had also wiped the spilled coffee from the floor. At the time, I had been grateful. Now I wished he had left everything untouched. I carried Dad's belongings into the dining room and emptied the hospital bag. Wallet, watch, loose change, house keys, car key, small brass key. A black plastic access card with no label. I held the card up to the light. Harbor shipping. Dad had carried both the mailbox key and the entry card when he died. Whoever broke into box 214 had used a different access card. I searched his wallet. There were 2 credit cards, a grocery rewards card, his driver's license, and $86 in cash. Behind an old photograph of my mother, I found a folded receipt. It was from Harbor Shipping. 6 months of mailbox rental had been paid in cash 3 weeks earlier. Dad had renewed the box through December. That suggested he had expected to keep using it. I began in his office. My father was organized without being obsessive. Tax returns were labeled by year. Insurance policies occupied one drawer. Appliance manuals filled another. His checkbook matched his online banking down to the last dollar. Nothing mentioned Fairmont. Nothing explained box 214. I searched for correspondence from law firms, canceled checks, hotel receipts, unfamiliar phone numbers, or any evidence that Dad had been keeping a second life from me. After 2 hours, I found only one inconsistency. A hanging file labeled property was empty. Dad owned his house outright. I remembered seeing the deed in that folder the previous year when he updated his homeowner's insurance. The deed was gone. So were the original mortgage release and the property survey. Copies could be replaced, but someone had removed all 3. I checked his desk drawers again. At the back of the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of printer paper, I found a narrow envelope containing a key, not the mailbox key. This one was modern, silver, and stamped with a number, 317. A storage unit, I thought, or a locker. Taped to the envelope was a handwritten note. Not until I confirmed the name, that was all. The handwriting was Dad's. I photographed the note, then called Russell. He answered on the second ring. "How are you holding up? I need to ask you something. When you found Dad, was anyone else in the house?" "No, why?" "Was the front door open?" "About 6 inches." Was that normal? Grant sometimes left it open when he brought in the newspaper. He collapsed in the kitchen before 7. The paper was still outside. Russell went quiet. You think someone was there? I don't know. I didn't see anyone. What exactly did you touch, Claire? I'm not blaming you. I need to know, he exhaled slowly. I checked his pulse, called 911. Moved the chair because the paramedics needed room. Then after they took him, I swept up the broken mug and wiped the floor. Did you throw the pieces away? In the kitchen trash. I crossed the room and opened the cabinet beneath the sink. The trash bin was empty. Where's the bag? I took it to my house. Your bin was full, so I put it with mine for collection. What day is your trash collected? This morning. The truck had already passed. What kind of coffee did Dad drink? Same as always. Black. Did you make any? No. Did you see his medication? On the counter. It was not there now. I had taken his prescription bottles home from the hospital, but those were the medications found in his bathroom cabinet. His weekly pill organizer was missing. Russell, did the paramedics take his pill organizer? I don't think so. Did you? No. Was anyone else inside after the ambulance left? Just me. Then you arrived. I remembered entering through the front door and finding Russell standing in the kitchen with a trash bag in one hand and a damp towel in the other. He had hugged me. He had made tea. He had offered to call the funeral home. Russell had lived next door for 11 years. He and Dad repaired fences together, watched baseball on summer evenings, and exchanged spare keys for emergencies. He was the closest friend my father had. He also had access to the house, and he knew Dad was dead before almost anyone else. Did it ever mention Fairmont? I asked. No, a private mailbox. No, someone pretending to be his nephew. Another pause. No, what's going on? I'm trying to understand something. Let me come over. I'm leaving soon. Where? I looked at the key marked 317. I don't know yet. That was not entirely a lie. The number on the key led me to a self-storage facility 6 miles from Dad's house. Unit 317 was in the climate-controlled building at the rear of the property. The office manager confirmed the unit belonged to Grant Mercer, but refused to let me inside until I showed identification and a copy of the temporary estate paperwork the funeral home had helped me obtain. The unit was small. Inside were a folding chair, a metal file cabinet, and a wooden table. Nothing else, no furniture, no boxes, no family possessions. The file cabinet was locked, but the silver key opened it. The top drawer contained 12 identical red folders. Each was labeled with a date. The earliest was 17 years ago. The latest was last month. Inside every folder was a copy of the same newspaper article. Local infant abduction remains unsolved. The article described a 3-month-old girl named Natalie Voss who had disappeared from her parents' home in Fairmont in 1989. There had been no ransom demand, no sign of forced entry. The child's mother claimed she had placed Natalie in her crib shortly after midnight. By 6 in the morning, the baby was gone. The investigation focused briefly on the parents, then on a drifter seen near the neighborhood. No arrest was ever made. I read the article twice before I noticed the photograph. Natalie's mother stood outside the Fairmont police station beside her husband. She was 26 at the time. Her name was Sylvia Voss. She had my eyes, not similar eyes, my eyes, the same wide spacing. The same slight downward turn at the outer corners. My first thought was that I was inventing the resemblance because I was frightened. Then I opened the second folder. It contained the article and a photograph of me at age 5. The third held the article and my second-grade school portrait. Every folder documented a different period of my life. School pictures, soccer team photographs, a copy of my learner's permit, my college graduation announcement, a photograph from my wedding, though the marriage had ended 3 years later. The final folder contained a recent picture of me leaving my apartment. I was carrying groceries. The photograph had been taken from across the street. At the bottom of the drawer was a sealed DNA test kit. Unused. Beneath it lay a photocopy of my birth certificate. It listed my parents as Grant Mercer and Vivian Mercer. My mother had died when I was 13. I had never questioned who she was. I sat in the folding chair because my legs would no longer hold me. The question I had brought into the storage unit had been simple. Why had Dad rented a private mailbox? Now it felt irrelevant. The real question was why he had spent 17 years collecting evidence that I might be a missing child. The bottom drawer contained correspondence. Most of it was between Dad and a private investigator named Adrian Cole. The letters began 17 years earlier, shortly after my mother's death. The first was only a page long. Mr. Mercer, I reviewed the photographs you provided. Physical resemblance alone is not evidence, particularly when comparing images across age and lighting. However, the birth documentation contains irregularities worth examining. The hospital listed on your daughter's certificate did not operate a maternity ward in the year shown. My hands began to shake. The next letter was dated 3 weeks later. The physician's signature belongs to Dr. Samuel Pike, who died 11 months before the recorded birth. Another letter followed. I found no state record matching the certificate number. I stopped reading and walked into the hallway for air. The storage building was cool and silent. Somewhere beyond the walls, a truck reversed with a distant electronic beep. My entire childhood rearranged itself in fragments. We had no photographs of me in the hospital, no baby shower pictures, no relatives who remembered my birth. Dad always said my mother had wanted privacy. Vivian had been estranged from her family. She had died before I was old enough to ask difficult questions. When I returned to the unit, I read the rest. The investigator had concluded that my birth certificate was fraudulent. Dad had then sent him strands of hair taken from my brush and a sample from himself. The DNA test showed he was not my biological father. There was no test for my mother. Vivian had already been cremated. The letters changed after that. Dad stopped asking whether I was his daughter. He began asking where Vivian had been in the summer of 1989. Hotel records placed her in Fairmont. A former co-worker remembered Vivian returning home unexpectedly with a baby. She claimed the child belonged to a cousin who could not care for her. There was no cousin. Dad had been working on an offshore construction project at the time. He returned after 6 weeks and was told Vivian had given birth prematurely while visiting relatives. He had believed her, or perhaps he had chosen to believe her. I found a letter Dad had written but never sent. It was addressed to Sylvia Voss. I believe my wife may have taken your daughter. I believe the woman I raised as mine may be Natalie. Before I contact you, I need proof. She has already lost one mother. I will not destroy her life based on suspicion. The letter was dated 16 years ago. Dad had known for almost half my life, yet he had said nothing. The final documents were recent emails printed from an encrypted account. Adrian Cole had retired, and Dad had hired a genealogist named Mara Bell to trace Sylvia Voss. Sylvia had moved twice, divorced, and returned to Fairmont. She was alive. 3 months ago, Dad contacted her attorney anonymously and offered to provide evidence about Natalie's disappearance. The attorney requested proof. Dad sent copies of the false birth certificate and Vivian's travel records. Then, last week, the law office mailed something to Box 214. The final printed email from Dad read, "I received Sylvia's DNA sample today. I will compare it to Claire's before making contact. Until then, do not reveal my identity. Someone has been accessing my files." I read the last sentence again. Someone has been accessing my files. The email was dated 2 days before Dad died. The express envelope from Fairmont had contained Sylvia Voss's DNA sample. That was what had been inside the mailbox, and someone had stolen it before Dad could run the test. My phone rang. Russell. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a message appeared. "I'm at Grant's house. Call me." The back door was open. I had locked every door before leaving. I called the detective assigned to the mailbox break-in instead. Detective Jonah Price met me at Dad's house 40 minutes later. Russell was waiting in the driveway. "I found it like this," he said as we approached the rear entrance. The back door stood open. There was no damage around the frame. "Who has a key?" Detective Price asked. "Russell," I said. Russell stared at me. "So do you." My key was with me. So was mine. "May I see it?" Price asked. Russell removed his key ring and handed it over. The house key was there. Inside, Dad's office had been searched. Desk drawers were open. Papers covered the floor. The empty property folder had been pulled from the cabinet. Nothing else appeared disturbed. Whoever came in knew where to look, Price said. Russell folded his arms. Claire, tell him about the storage unit. I turned toward him. How do you know about that? His expression shifted from impatience to confusion. You mentioned it. No, I didn't. You said you found a key. I said I was leaving. At Grant's earlier. You said something about a unit. I never told you where I was going. For several seconds, none of us spoke. Then Russell shook his head. I must have assumed. Why? Grant had storage. I knew that. You told me he never mentioned a private mailbox. A mailbox isn't storage. Did he tell you what was in Unit 317? No. Did you follow me there? His face reddened. This is absurd. Detective Price stepped between us. Mr. Dane, when did you enter the house today? About 20 minutes before you arrived. How? The back door was open. You touched nothing? No. Did you enter Mr. Mercer's home yesterday after Miss Mercer left? No. Did you access Harbor Shipping last night? Of course not. Price asked for the access card on his key ring. Russell had one. He said he rented a mailbox at Harbor Shipping for his consulting business. That explained how he could have entered the lobby. It did not prove he had. Price took the card number and asked Russell to come to the station for a formal interview. Russell refused until Price clarified that he was not under arrest. Then he left without looking at me. I watched his car turn the corner. You think he broke into the box, Price said. I think he knew about the storage unit when he shouldn't have. Could your father have told him? Yes, but you don't believe that. I looked at the scattered files. My father wrote that someone had been accessing his records. Price crouched near the desk. There's no forced entry here. Either the intruder had a key or the door was left unlocked. Russell had a key, so did you? My father's key was returned to me at the hospital. I'm not suggesting you did this. I'm saying keys can be copied. He lifted a sheet of paper from the floor. It was an old bank statement. Was anything valuable kept here? Only documents. What documents are missing? The deed, mortgage release, and property survey. Why steal those? I don't know. That was the first mystery again. Not who I was, not whether Vivian had abducted me. Why would someone break into Dad's mailbox, take Sylvia's DNA sample, search his office, and remove property records? All of it had to connect. One mystery. One reason. I walked through the house slowly, trying to see it as an intruder would. If someone wanted to hide the truth about my identity, they would steal the DNA sample and the investigator's files. But the files were in the storage unit. The intruder had searched the house instead. That meant they did not know where Dad kept the evidence. Yet Russell had somehow known about the unit, unless he had not followed me there, unless he had been looking for something else. In the kitchen, I noticed a pale rectangle on the wall beside the refrigerator. A calendar had hung there for years. It was gone. Was a calendar taken into evidence? I asked. Price shook his head. I searched the trash, recycling bin, and drawers. Nothing. Dad used the calendar to write appointments. Doctor visits, haircuts, repair estimates, lunches with friends. Someone had taken it after he died. I called the hospital and asked whether they had found a calendar or loose papers with Dad's belongings. They had not. Then I called the pharmacy. The pharmacist confirmed Dad had filled his blood pressure medication 12 days earlier. Was there anything unusual about the prescription? I asked. No. Did he pick it up? A man collected it. My father? I can check the signature. She returned after a minute. It was signed R. Dane, Russell. He was authorized on your father's account, she said. He had picked up prescriptions before. What medication was it? She named the drug and dosage. Could an overdose cause a fatal heart rhythm? There was a pause. Any medication can be dangerous if taken incorrectly. You should speak to a physician. I thanked her and hung up. Dad's pill organizer was missing. Russell had picked up his newest prescription. Russell had cleaned the coffee. Russell had disposed of the broken mug, and Russell had found the body. The theory formed too neatly. That made me distrust it. If Russell had killed Dad, why call 911? Why leave the front door open? Why break into the mailbox while using an access card associated with the same store where he rented his own box? Why reveal he had picked up the medication when the pharmacy had a record? It felt less like a careful crime than a trail designed to lead directly toward him. Detective Price requested the pharmacy footage and arranged to seize Russell's access card. That evening, he called. The card used to enter harbor shipping was not Russell's. You said the system couldn't identify individual cards. The store keeps an invoice log. Cards are sold in numbered blocks. The entry number came from a block issued almost 9 years ago. To whom? Your father. I sat up in bed. Dad used his own card? Not the one found in his belongings. A second card from the same batch. Who had it? We don't know. Then I remembered something. My father had once given me an access card to his house alarm company. He tended to keep duplicates of everything. Could the card have been stored at home? Yes. Then whoever entered his house could have taken it. Possibly. Did Russell's interview help? He admits knowing about the storage unit. My grip tightened. He lied to me. He says your father asked him 6 months ago to drive past the facility and see whether anyone appeared to be following him. He did not know the unit number or what was inside. Why didn't he say that earlier? He thought you would believe he was involved. That worked well. Price continued. The pharmacy footage confirms Russell picked up the medication, but he handed the unopened bag to your father that afternoon. Your father appears on his front door camera carrying it inside. Russell has a camera? Yes. Does it show who entered Dad's house the morning he died? The angle doesn't cover your father's front door. Convenient. It does show Russell leaving his house at 6:42 and crossing the lawn. It also shows another vehicle passing at 6:31. What vehicle? A dark sedan, plate unreadable. Did it stop? Not in view. I barely slept. The next morning, I returned to Unit 317. I needed to understand what Dad had discovered after the last printed email. The DNA kit was still sealed, but perhaps the mailbox had contained more than Sylvia's sample. Nina had said everything was taken. Dad may have stored other letters there. I searched each folder again. On the back of the final photograph, the one of me carrying groceries, Dad had written a date and 2 words, same vehicle. I examined the picture. At the edge of the frame, beyond my shoulder, a dark sedan was parked across from my apartment. I compared it with an earlier photograph. The same car appeared behind me at my father's funeral planning appointment, taken from across the parking lot. Someone had been watching me, or Dad had believed they were. I called the genealogist, Mara Bell. She answered cautiously until I mentioned Grant Mercer. He's dead, she asked. 2 days ago? Oh, God, you were helping him investigate Natalie Voss. Silence. I can't discuss client matters. I'm his daughter. That doesn't release me from confidentiality. I may be Natalie. Another pause. Meet me in Fairmont, she said. Mara's office occupied the second floor of an old bank building. She was a compact woman in her 40s with short black hair and a voice that rarely changed volume. She locked the office door behind me. Grant believed someone was monitoring his contact with Sylvia's attorney, she said. Who, he didn't know. At first, he suspected Sylvia's former husband. Why? The Voss marriage ended after the child disappeared. Sylvia believed her husband had arranged the kidnapping. He believed she had killed the baby and invented the abduction. Was either theory supported? No. Then who knew Dad had contacted the attorney? The attorney. Sylvia, me. Possibly office staff. Anyone else? Grant mailed the documents anonymously, but he made one mistake. What? He included a copy of your birth certificate. I waited for the explanation. The certificate contains an address in Fairmont. A house on Larkspur Road? Whose house? That's what Grant asked me to find out. Mara opened a folder. The property belonged to a woman named Helena Pike. Pike, the widow of Dr. Samuel Pike. The physician whose forged signature appears on your certificate. The room seemed to narrow around me. Did Vivian know Helena? We found no direct connection. But Dad did. Mara slid a photograph across the desk. It showed my father standing beside Helena Pike at a charity luncheon. The date was 4 years before I was born. Your father worked for Helena's construction company, Mara said. She owned several development firms. Grant was a project manager. I stared at the picture. Dad had claimed he met my mother after taking a job out of state. You think he knew the certificate was fake from the beginning? I think he knew Helena Pike. That isn't the same thing? No. Where is Helena now? She died 8 years ago. Then why would anyone still care? Mara placed a second document beside the photograph. It was a property transfer. 3 weeks after Natalie disappeared, Helena Pike sold the Larkspur Road house. The buyer was Grant Mercer. My father. He had owned a house in Fairmont and never told me. What happened to it? I asked. He sold it 6 months later. To whom? Russell Dane. For several seconds I heard nothing but the clock on Mara's wall. Russell knew my father back then? Yes. He told me they met 11 years ago. That wasn't true. I stood so quickly my chair struck the wall. Why didn't Dad tell me this? He had only confirmed the transfer last week. The original deed records had been misindexed. He requested certified copies. The missing property documents, the envelope from the Fairmont Law Office, the storage unit note. Not until I confirmed the name. Dad had not been trying only to confirm my identity. He had been trying to confirm who owned the house connected to my false birth certificate. What name? I asked. Mara looked at me carefully. The person who signed as witness on the original sale to your father. Who was it? Vivian Mercer. My mother had known Dad when he bought the house. Dad had lied about when they met. Russell had lied about when he met Dad. All three were connected to the address on my fraudulent birth certificate. The mystery was no longer whether Vivian had taken me. It was whether she had done it alone. Mara gave me copies of the property records. Before leaving, I asked one final question. Did Dad mention Russell recently? Yes. What did he say? He said Russell was afraid of the wrong thing. What does that mean? I asked him. He said, Russell thinks I'm trying to prove who took Natalie. I'm trying to prove who gave her away. I drove straight to Russell's house. Detective Price told me not to confront him, but I did not intend to accuse him of murder. I wanted him to explain the house. Russell opened the door wearing the same shirt he had worn at the police station. His face changed when he saw the documents in my hand. You knew Dad in Fairmont? He did not deny it. Come inside. No, Claire, please. Did you own the house on Larkspur Road? For 7 months. Why? Your father asked me to buy it. Why? He looked past me toward Dad's empty driveway. Because Helena Pike was threatening to take you back. The answer was so unexpected that I forgot every question I had prepared. Take me back from whom? From Vivian. Did Vivian abduct me? Russell rubbed both hands over his face. Not exactly. Then explain exactly. He stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind him. Helena ran a private adoption scheme. I said nothing. She owned maternity homes through shell companies, he continued. Women were promised medical care and help placing their babies. Some adoptions were legal, some weren't. Natalie wasn't placed for adoption. No. Then how did Helena get her? I never knew. You expect me to believe that? I knew Helena arranged babies for wealthy couples who didn't want questions. I did not know she was taking children from their homes. What was Dad's role? He discovered financial irregularities in one of her construction accounts. Payments to doctors, clerks, social workers. He confronted her. And then, she offered him money to stay quiet. He refused, so she gave him a stolen baby. No, Vivian took you. He lowered his voice. She worked as Helena's bookkeeper. Vivian found a file with your photograph and the Voss family's address. Helena had arranged your kidnapping for a couple in another state. Before the transfer happened, Vivian took you from the Larkspur house. Why not call the police? Because she had helped Helena falsify records. Because Helena threatened to frame her as the kidnapper. And because by then, Vivian believed returning you would expose you to whoever had ordered the abduction. That makes no sense. Returning me to my parents would have protected me. It would have been the right thing. Vivian was terrified and selfish. Both can be true. Where was Dad? Working offshore. Vivian called him and said she had a baby who would be killed if Helena found her. Grant came home and helped create the lie. I felt physically unsteady. He knew I was Natalie, he suspected. Vivian refused to tell him where you came from. She claimed your mother had surrendered you privately. But he bought the house. To control the records and keep Helena from using it, then he sold it to me so his name would disappear from the chain. Why you? I was Grant's friend. And I owed Helena money. You were part of it. I transported documents, never children. That is not a defense. No. Why did Dad spend 17 years investigating if he already knew? After Vivian died, he found one of Helena's ledgers. It included dates and coded payments. He realized your arrival matched Natalie's disappearance, and you helped him at first. What changed? He decided to contact Sylvia. And you didn't want him to. I wanted proof first. He had proof coming to box 214. Russell's eyes narrowed. What proof? Sylvia's DNA? I didn't know that. Someone did. He leaned against the porch railing. I didn't break into the box. Did you enter Dad's house? Not until I found him. Did you remove his pill organizer? No. Did you kill him? His face crumpled with something that looked more like grief than fear. No. Who else knew? About you? Helena. Vivian. Grant. Me, Helena and Vivian are dead. Yes. Then who is watching me? Russell went still. What? I showed him the photograph with the dark sedan. All the color left his face. That car was outside Grant's house last week. Who drives it? I don't know. But Grant followed it once. Where? Fairmont? To the law office? No, to Sylvia Voss's house. The person watching me had also been watching Sylvia. Russell insisted we call Detective Price. This time I agreed. Price arrived with another officer and separated us. While he questioned Russell inside, I sat in my car and studied the property documents. Helena sold the Larkspur house to Dad. Dad sold it to Russell. Russell sold it 7 months later to a company called Northlake Holdings. I searched the company on my phone. It still existed. Its registered agent was the law firm representing Sylvia Voss, the same law office that had mailed the DNA sample. At first, I thought it meant Sylvia's attorney was involved in the old adoption scheme. Then I checked the company's formation date. Northlake Holdings had been created 6 months ago. The house had not been sold to it in 1989. The property record Mara gave me had been altered. I called her. She answered immediately. Where did you get the deed showing Russell's sale to Northlake? From the county archive. Northlake didn't exist until this year. Silence. Mara, that's impossible. Look it up. I heard keyboard clicks, then nothing. Mara, did you give Dad the same copy? Yes. When? Last week. The certified documents in Dad's office had not been stolen because someone feared what they proved. They had been stolen because they proved the copy was false. Someone had inserted a forged deed into the archive to redirect Dad's suspicion toward a company connected to Sylvia's attorney. The midpoint of the mystery shifted again. We had been asking who wanted to prevent the DNA test. But someone had also been feeding Dad false evidence. They did not merely want the truth hidden, they wanted him to reach the wrong truth. I asked Mara to photograph the archive certification marks on her copy. Then I called the county recorder. The clerk confirmed that the official chain of title showed Russell selling the house in 1990 to an individual named Elaine Porter. Not Northlake Holdings. Who is Elaine Porter? She held the property until 2008, and after that, it passed to her daughter. What daughter? Let me check. I waited. Dr. Nina Porter. The name meant nothing for half a second. Then it did. Nina, the manager of Harbor Shipping. I returned to the shipping center with Detective Price. The front door was locked. A handwritten sign said the store had closed due to an emergency. Price called the number on file. No answer. He obtained permission from the property owner to enter. The mailbox lobby was empty. Behind the counter, Nina's office had been stripped of personal items. The computer remained, but the hard drive was gone. In the trash, we found pieces of a shredded calendar. Dad's calendar. Price collected the fragments. A technician reconstructed enough of one page to reveal an appointment written 3 days before Dad's death. Nina P. Confirm mother's name. The note in the storage unit had said, not until I confirm the name. Dad had not been confirming Natalie's name. He had been confirming Nina's mother's name. Elaine Porter had purchased the Larkspur house from Russell. Her daughter now managed the shipping store where Dad kept his evidence. Nina had access to box 214. She knew when the law office envelope arrived. She knew Dad's phone number, and she had called me after the break-in. Why report a theft she had committed? Because she wanted the theft documented. because she wanted me to believe someone else had taken the contents. The security footage showed a disguised man entering after hours, but Nina controlled the cameras, the access cards, and the customer records. She could have staged everything. We found her sedan at the Fairmont train station that evening. The car matched the one in Dad's photographs. Inside the trunk was Dad's pill organizer, his missing property records, a drill, brown paper, and the destroyed hard drive from Harbor Shipping. There was also a padded express envelope. The return address belonged to Sylvia's law firm. The envelope was empty. Nina was arrested the following morning at a motel outside the state line. She denied killing Dad. She denied breaking into the mailbox. She claimed the items in her trunk had been planted. Then the autopsy results arrived. Dad had suffered a fatal arrhythmia caused by a dangerously high concentration of his blood pressure medication. The pills in his organizer had been crushed and dissolved into his coffee. His prescription bottle contained the correct number of tablets because someone had replaced the missing pills with older tablets of the same appearance. The pharmacy video showed Russell collecting the prescription. But additional footage from a camera outside Dad's house showed Nina arriving the evening before his death. She wore a Harbor Shipping jacket and carried an express envelope. Dad let her inside. She stayed 19 minutes. According to Russell, Dad called him afterward and said he had finally confirmed the mother's name. Nina Porter's mother, Elaine, had not merely purchased the Larkspur house. She had been Helena Pike's nurse, and she had taken Natalie from the Voss home. The final explanation came from Elaine's records, found in a locked cabinet at Nina's house. Helena Pike had arranged the kidnapping after a wealthy couple requested an infant matching a specific description. Elaine entered the Voss home using a key copied from a cleaning service employee. She took Natalie and brought her to Larkspur Road. Vivian discovered the child before the transfer. She took Natalie, contacted Dad, and fled. But Vivian did not rescue me out of pure courage. She had recently learned she could not have children. She convinced herself that hiding me was safer than returning me. Dad believed her claim that my biological mother had surrendered me. He helped create the false certificate using forms stolen from Helena's files. Years later, after Vivian died, he learned the truth. He spent the rest of his life trying to prove it without losing me. Nina had grown up knowing fragments of her mother's involvement. After Elaine died, Nina found the complete records. Those records implicated Elaine in the kidnapping and Nina herself in later attempts to hide evidence. Nina had altered the archive deed, monitored Sylvia's attorney, and followed me. When Dad rented a mailbox at her store under his real name, she recognized it from Elaine's files. She watched his mail. The envelope from Sylvia's attorney did contain a DNA sample. But Nina did not steal it after Dad died. She took it when it arrived. She replaced it with a sample from herself. Dad ran the test the night before his death. The results showed that the sample was not maternally related to me. That should have ended his investigation. Instead, it made him suspicious. He had already obtained Nina's discarded coffee cup and sent it to a separate laboratory. The comparison showed that Nina's DNA was closely related to material preserved in Elaine's medical file. That confirmed Nina was Elaine's daughter. It also confirmed the sample mailed by Sylvia's lawyer had been switched. Dad called Nina and asked her to come to the house. He confronted her with the result. Nina admitted her mother had taken Natalie, but insisted the baby had died before any transfer occurred. Dad did not believe her. He told her he had requested certified property records and planned to contact the police in the morning. While he made coffee, Nina crushed several of his pills into the mug. She took his calendar, the duplicate harbor access card, and the original property documents. She left the front door partly open, expecting his death to appear natural. After Russell found the body, Nina waited until late that evening to stage the mailbox break-in. She reported it the next morning so the police, and I, would focus on the missing envelope rather than on what Dad had already received and tested. She believed the original sample had been destroyed. It had not. Dad had divided it. The second swab was sealed inside the back cover of the red folder containing the newspaper article. I had handled the folder without noticing the narrow compartment. The DNA result arrived 3 weeks after Nina's arrest. Sylvia Voss was my biological mother. I met her in Fairmont in a private room at her attorney's office. She was 63. Her hair was silver, and her hands shook when she saw me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she said the name she had given me 37 years earlier. Natalie. I had expected the name to feel like an answer. Instead, it felt like a door. Behind it was a life that belonged to me and did not belong to me. I told her my name was Claire. She nodded and said she understood. Then she asked whether Grant had loved me. That was the question I could answer without hesitation. Yes, Dad had lied to me. He had delayed the truth for years because he was afraid of losing me, afraid of destroying my memory of Vivian, and afraid of what the truth would do to Sylvia. Those choices had consequences. They gave Nina time to find him. They left me grieving a father while discovering another mother. But every folder in Unit 317 told the same story. Dad had never stopped searching, not because he doubted I was his daughter, because he knew I was. He wanted to return the truth to the woman who had lost me without making me feel that I had been taken from him. In the final letter he wrote to Sylvia, the one he never mailed, he had crossed out the first paragraph and replaced it with a single sentence. I am not contacting you to surrender my daughter. I am contacting you because she was always yours, too. Sylvia and I did not become family in one meeting. There was no instant healing. We began with coffee every other Sunday. She showed me photographs of the nursery she had kept unchanged for 5 years. I showed her pictures of Dad teaching me to ride a bicycle, standing beside me at graduation, and pretending not to cry at my wedding. Russell pleaded guilty to helping conceal the illegal property transfer in 1989. He had not known I was kidnapped, but he had known enough to ask questions and chose not to. Nina was convicted of Dad's murder, evidence tampering, and burglary. The old kidnapping case was formally closed. Several other records in Helena Pike's files led investigators to families who had spent decades wondering where their children had gone. Some answers brought reunions. Others brought grief. Dad's house remained mine. For months, I could not enter the kitchen without seeing the empty space where he had fallen. Eventually, I replaced the table. I kept his chair. The brass key to box 214 now rests in the top drawer of my desk beside the original newspaper article about Natalie Voss. I no longer think of the mailbox as the place where someone stole my father's secret. It was the place where he tried to deliver the truth carefully, one piece at a time. Nina believed that emptying the box would erase what he knew. She misunderstood him. Dad had never trusted one hiding place. He left the letters in the storage unit. The second DNA swab in the folder. The real property records in a safe deposit box registered under my name, and the final clue inside his wallet, behind my mother's photograph. I found it weeks later when I removed the receipt from Harbor Shipping. Written on the back were 3 words: Claire decides everything. In the end, that was what he had been protecting. Not the secret, not himself. My right to learn the truth and decide what it meant. I was born Natalie Voss. I was raised Claire Mercer. Both names belonged to me. And so did the father who spent 17 years trying to solve the mystery of where I came from, only to discover that the most important truth had never been hidden in a mailbox, a deed, or a DNA test. It was in every ordinary day he had chosen to be my father.